Chapter 1. The return home. Ethan stood in front of his childhood home, the familiar scent of pine and freshly cut grass filling the air. It had been years since he'd left this place behind, chasing a career in a city that felt colder, emptier. His return wasn't planned. Life had a funny way of making decisions for him. A change of scenery, a fresh start. He had convinced himself that coming back to the place he once called home would help him reset. But as he gazed at the house, it felt like stepping into a past he barely recognized. His hands shook slightly as he fumbled with the keys, the weight of the memories pressing in on him. The house had remained almost the same, save for a few minor renovations that didn't quite capture the warmth it once held. The sound of a car engine approaching broke his reverie, and when he looked up, he saw her. Near. The girl next door, the same Mia who used to run around with him, who used to race him to the park, who had been his partner in every childhood adventure. But now, as he took in her appearance, he realized how much she had changed. Gone was the shy, quiet girl from his youth. In her place stood a confident, poised woman with a warmth that seemed to shine through even the briefest of smiles. Mia had always been beautiful, but there was something more about her now. The way she held herself, the grace in her movements, it was all new. And yet, the familiarity in her eyes, the spark that he had always been drawn to, was still there. "Welcome back, Ethan," she said with a soft chuckle, her voice laced with a hint of nostalgia. "You never told me you were moving back." Ethan managed a smile, his heart thudding in his chest. "I didn't plan on it, just needed a change, I guess." Her gaze softened as she studied him for a moment, the silence between them stretching longer than either of them was comfortable with. Finally, she broke it. "Well, it's good to have you back. Let me know if you need anything. I'm just next door." Next door. That phrase, those words had once been so simple. But now, standing there in front of her, the weight of the unspoken between them made it feel like a universe separated them. A lot had changed since the last time they were together, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to face all of it. "Thanks, Mia," he said, his voice quieter than he intended. He took a step back toward the door, but before he could turn the knob, Mia's voice stopped him. "Hey, Ethan, you know, we used to be inseparable." The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stretch between them. His mind raced with memories of their childhood days spent climbing trees, playing games, and sharing secrets. But it wasn't just the past that tugged at him. It was the way her eyes lingered on him, the way her smile seemed just a little too knowing. Ethan hesitated before answering, unsure of where the conversation was heading, unsure of where his emotions were taking him. For a long moment, they stood in silence, neither knowing what to say. Finally, Mia turned to leave, but not before offering him one last look. There was something in her gaze, a mix of longing and curiosity, a silent invitation that Ethan couldn't quite decipher. As she walked away, Ethan stood frozen on the porch, staring at the space she had just vacated. His heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts a whirlwind of confusion. It was only the first day, and already he could tell that this return home was going to be more complicated than he ever imagined. The girl next door was no longer the carefree girl he remembered. Mia had become a stranger with a past, and somehow she had managed to slip into his thoughts, unknowingly pulling him back into a world he thought he had left behind. Chapter 2. Old memories. Resurfaced days following Ethan's return to the house felt like walking through a dream, a fog that both comforted and unsettled him. The old house had retained its charm, but it was different now, unfamiliar in ways that stirred up the most haunting kind of nostalgia. Each corner seemed to echo with the laughter of his younger self, with memories of a time when life had been simpler. As he unpacked boxes and reconnected with old friends, Mia found herself dropping by more often than she used to. It wasn't intentional at first, but somehow their conversations picked up where they had left off years ago. They spoke about childhood pranks, the trouble they'd gotten into with their parents, and the old neighborhood dogs that had followed them everywhere. One evening, Mia invited Ethan over for coffee at her place, a casual gesture that felt anything but casual. Her house, like everything about her, had changed. It was filled with art. Her own paintings lined the walls, vibrant and bold. Ethan marveled at the transformation of the girl next door into this accomplished artist. Yet there was something unsettling about the quiet solitude that seemed to follow her around. They sat on the small balcony overlooking the neighborhood, the sun beginning to dip below the horizon. The distant hum of streetlights flickered as the evening settled in. For a while, they were just a people in their 20s, talking about life, about everything and nothing at all. The atmosphere felt light, almost effortless. But as Ethan glanced at Mia, he noticed the way her fingers toyed with the edge of her coffee mug, the absent look in her eyes when she stared off into the distance. "Have you been happy here?" Mia asked suddenly, her voice pulling him back into the moment. Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "It's strange coming back, but I think it's what I needed. A fresh start." He paused, studying her face. The way her expression seemed to shift ever so slightly when he spoke. "What about you? You've changed a lot." "It's hard to believe the Mia I knew is the same one standing in front of me now." Mia let out a soft laugh, though it lacked the usual warmth. "I guess we all change in time. Life has a way of doing that." Ethan's gaze lingered on her, wondering if there was something more beneath her words. The way she said it, as though she were talking about someone else, made him feel as if there were parts of her that were still hidden, even from herself. As if reading his thoughts, Mia quickly changed the subject, but not before he caught the fleeting look of vulnerability in her eyes. It made his heart ache, though he didn't quite understand why. They spent hours talking, but every time Mia laughed, it seemed to echo with a sadness that she didn't let him see. The girl next door was still there, the one he had grown up with, but she was layered with complexity now, her smiles hiding deeper emotions that she didn't share. Before he left, Mia walked him to the door, her smile tight, like she was fighting to keep something buried inside. "Thanks for coming by," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan paused on the doorstep, feeling an odd pull in his chest. "You're welcome. We should do this more often." Mia's eyes met. Chapter 3. The artist's 𝐼𝐻 couldn't shake the image of Mia from his mind. She had been on his thoughts since the moment he stepped back into his childhood home. But now, after the evening they had spent together, he couldn't deny the emotions she stirred within him. She had become someone new, someone he wasn't sure he could keep up with. Mia, the girl next door, had become an accomplished artist, a woman who had lived a life without him. Over the next few days, their casual encounters continued. They would exchange pleasantries when their paths crossed, but each interaction seemed charged with an energy that of them could ignore. There was always the same undercurrent, something that neither one dared to address, as though speaking it aloud would change everything. One evening, Mia invited him over again, this time to show him some of her latest work. It was an invitation Ethan had been hoping for, but as he walked into her studio, he realized how little he knew of the woman she had become. The room was filled with canvases, some half-finished, others complete, all bursting with color and emotion. Every piece was an extension of Mia, a window into her soul that she had bared to the world. He had known her as a carefree child who loved to draw in the dirt, who'd scribbled on scraps of paper and dreamed of one day becoming an artist. But this was a far cry from the girl he remembered. This was someone who had cultivated a passion, honed a craft, and used her art as a way to speak when words couldn't quite capture what she felt. Wow, Ethan breathed as he stepped closer to one of the larger pieces, a portrait of a woman with eyes full of longing. It was raw, emotional, and beautiful in ways that left him speechless. "I've been working on it for a while," Mia said, standing behind him, her voice quieter than usual. It's about love, I think, or the absence of it." Ethan turned toward her, noticing the way her hands fidgeted as she avoided his gaze. There was a distance between them now, one that had grown wider with each passing day. Despite the closeness they shared in the past, he could feel it, a wall she had carefully built between them, though he couldn't understand why. "I can see that," Ethan said, his voice softer. "It's incredible, Mia." She gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile before stepping back. "Thanks, but it's not just the art. I've been thinking a lot about where I'm going in life." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Mia's expression hardened, as though she was wrestling with her own thoughts. "I mean, I'm not sure if I'm happy anymore. Everything I've worked for, all the success, it doesn't feel as fulfilling as I thought it would. It's like there's something missing." Ethan was taken aback. He'd always admired her dedication, the way she had thrown herself into her art and made a name for herself. But hearing her speak like this, it made him realize how little he knew about the woman she had become. His mind raced, wondering what she was really saying. "And what do you think is missing?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Mia looked at him, and for the first time, Ethan saw the vulnerability behind her confident exterior. "I don't know, maybe it's you." The words hung between them, and for a moment, Ethan felt his heart race. He wasn't sure what she meant, whether she was talking about the past or something more, but the tension was palpable, and he couldn't ignore the surge of emotions it stirred within him. "Mia." He took a cautious step toward her, his voice thick with uncertainty. "You've always had a way of keeping things inside. I'm not sure what you mean by that." She hesitated, looking down at her hands as if the words were too heavy to carry. "I've always felt something for you, Ethan, something I never let myself acknowledge. I pushed it down, buried it, because I thought it was just a phase, something we would both grow out of. But now, I can't ignore it anymore." The confession hung in the air, and Ethan could feel the weight of her admission, the raw honesty in her words. The girl next door, the one he had known for so long, was admitting something he hadn't been brave enough to say out loud. It hit him like a tidal wave, overwhelming him with a flood of emotions he wasn't sure how to process. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, his heart beating faster in his chest. "Mia, I've always cared about you, but I never thought you felt the same way." Her eyes softened as she stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to risk ruining what we had, but now I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is fine. I don't know if I can ignore this anymore." Ethan was caught in the turmoil of emotions surging inside him. He had always thought of Mia as the girl next door, the one he could never quite shake from his mind. But now, everything had shifted. The line between friendship and something more had blurred, and he wasn't sure how to navigate it. "Then what do we do?" he asked, his voice raw with uncertainty. "What do we do with what's between us?" Mia's gaze never wavered, and for the first time, she seemed truly vulnerable, like she was laying her heart bare for him to see. "I don't know, but I can't keep pretending. I just can't." Ethan's heart clenched. He had wanted this for so long, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure what to do with it. Mia's confession had opened a door that could never be closed again, and he had no idea where it would lead. Would they fall into something beautiful, or would this only complicate everything? As they stood there in the silence, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment when everything would change forever, the moment when the girl next door would no longer just be a memory, but something far more complex, far more real. Chapter 5. The unspoken truth. Tension between Ethan and Mia was palpable, hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Since Mark's return, their interactions had grown strained, charged with a quiet intensity that neither of them could ignore. Ethan couldn't help but notice the way Mia seemed to pull away whenever Mark was around, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when he was present. And yet, when they were alone, Mia was different, vulnerable, raw, and unguarded in a way he hadn't seen before. One evening, after dinner, Mia invited Ethan over to her place again. The invitation was simple, casual, but Ethan knew it was anything but. Their conversations had become more frequent, though they always skirted around the elephant in the room, her engagement to Mark. Ethan knew they couldn't keep dancing around it forever. Something had to give. When he arrived at her house, the warmth of the space wrapped around him like a familiar embrace. Mia was already there, her painting supplies scattered across the table, as though she had been in the middle of creating something. She was alone, and for the first time, since Mark's return. Ethan felt a sense of relief. "Hey," Mia greeted him, her voice soft but laden with meaning. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time we finally talked." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The weight of her words settled in his chest. "About what?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though it trembled slightly with the uncertainty he felt. Mia hesitated, her eyes shifting to the floor before meeting his gaze. "About us. About everything." The words hung in the air, and Ethan found himself at a crossroads. What did she mean by everything? Was she talking about the past, the present, or was she finally ready to confront the feelings they had both been denying for so long? "Okay," Ethan said quietly, stepping closer to her. He needed to hear this, needed to understand where they stood, where she stood. In all of this, Mia took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the table, the movement betraying the calm exterior she was trying so hard to maintain. "I don't know how to say this, but I can't stop thinking about you, Ethan. Ever since you came back, everything's been different. The way we talk, the way we look at each other. I've tried to ignore it, but I can't anymore." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded in his chest as he stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mia, she held up a hand, cutting him off. "I know," she said, her voice steady but filled with regret. "I know I'm engaged to Mark. I know I'm supposed to be with him. But every time I'm with you, it feels like I'm lying to myself. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel anymore." Ethan's mind raced as he processed her words. She had been hiding this, burying it beneath layers of politeness and obligation. But now the truth was out in the open. She wasn't just confused, she was torn between the man she had been with for so long, and the man who had always been there, in the background, waiting. "I don't want to hurt anyone, Ethan," Mia continued, her voice breaking slightly. "But I can't keep pretending that I don't feel something for you. I've always felt something, and it scares me." Ethan reached out, gently cupping her chin, forcing her to look at him. The touch was tender, but it carried with it the weight of everything they hadn't said before. "You don't have to be scared, Mia," he said softly. "I've always felt it too, always." The moment hung between them, raw and fragile, like a thread that could snap at any second. And for the briefest of moments, everything felt like it could be possible. Everything they had ever wanted could finally come to life. But Mia pulled away slightly, her eyes filling with uncertainty. "Ethan, I don't know what to do. I love Mark. I've been with him 4 years, and everyone expects us to get married. I can't just throw that all away." Her words struck him like a dagger. The love she had for Mark wasn't just a passing thing, it was real, deep-rooted, and tied to a future she had planned. It wasn't something she could simply walk away from, but that didn't change the fact that something was undeniably between them, something they couldn't ignore any longer. "I'm not asking you to throw anything away, Mia," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "I'm asking you to be honest with yourself. You don't have to have all the answers right now. But if there's something here, something between us, you can't keep pretending it doesn't exist." Mia's gaze dropped to the floor, and for a moment, Ethan wasn't sure if she would say anything at all. But then she lifted her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and clarity. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know this. I can't keep living a lie. I can't keep living for everyone else." Her words hit him like a wave, the weight of them crushing over him. Mia was at a crossroads, just as he was. They both were. The girl next door, the one he had known and loved for years, was no longer the same person. She was someone who had lived through her own heartaches and choices, someone who had spent years hiding her feelings for him. And now she was finally ready to face them. Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. "Whatever you decide, Mia, I'll be here. I always have been." She squeezed his hand gently, her eyes softening. "I know, Ethan. And that's what scares me the most." The silence between them was thick, the weight of their unspoken truths settling over them like a storm on the horizon. Neither of them knew what the future held, but one thing was clear: everything had changed. And now, there was no going back. Chapter 6. A love triangle forms. The days following their heart-to-heart had been filled with an unsettling calm. But the air between Mia and Ethan was thick with the weight of their unspoken truth. Mia had confessed her feelings, but her engagement to Mark still loomed like a shadow between them, impossible to ignore. Ethan's mind swirled with the confusion of it all, the desire to be with Mia colliding with the reality that she was promised to someone else. Despite their brief, stolen moments, there was still a wall between them, a wall built of guilt, obligation, and fear. Mia found herself torn between two worlds, and each day, the pull toward Ethan grew stronger. But she couldn't ignore the fact that she had a life with Mark, a life that, for better or worse, had been built over years. She loved Mark, she truly did, but the connection she shared with Ethan was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. It wasn't the same kind of love she had with Mark, but it was just as real, if not more. The internal struggle weighed heavily on Mia. Every time she saw Mark smile or heard his deep laugh, she remembered why she had fallen for him in the first place. He was steady, reliable, the kind of man who had always been there, the one her family and friends had come to expect her to be with. But then there was Ethan, the boy next door, the one who had always known her in ways no one else ever could. There was a chemistry between them, an undeniable pull that neither of them could fight. And the more time they spent together, the more Mia found herself questioning the future she had once envisioned with Mark. It was becoming a dangerous game, a game where she couldn't keep playing both sides. And the more she tried to deny it, the more the feelings she had for Ethan resurfaced, stronger than ever. One afternoon, Mia found herself once again standing outside her childhood home, where Ethan had invited her to meet for coffee. As she made her way toward the front door, she couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu, the way the light hit the porch, the way the breeze played with her hair. It all felt so familiar, yet so different at the same time. Ethan greeted her with a smile that seemed both warm and hesitant. He was standing on the porch, leaning against the railing, though waiting for her. There was a palpable tension between them, and Mia could feel it in the air. She stepped onto the porch, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey," she said softly, unsure of how to break the silence. "Hey," Ethan replied, his voice low, almost like he was trying to sound casual. "I'm glad you came. I didn't know where else to go," Mia admitted, her gaze drifting to the ground for a moment. She wasn't sure what she was doing anymore. All she knew was that she needed to talk to Ethan, needed to understand what all of this meant. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his brow furrowed. "Mia," he paused, clearly unsure of how to proceed. "I don't want to put pressure on you. I don't want to complicate things with Mark, but I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with just being friends." Mia's heart pounded in her chest. She had been hoping he would say something like this, yet the words still hit her like a wave, overwhelming and filled with a sense of fear. "I know," she whispered, barely able to keep her voice steady. "I've been feeling the same way, but I don't know what to do. I'm engaged, Ethan. I'm supposed to marry Mark." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes locked onto hers, searching for some kind of answer in her gaze. "I know you're engaged," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "But that doesn't change the way I feel about you. And I know you feel it too, Mia. I've seen the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention." Mia looked away, her heart aching. She didn't want to admit it, didn't want to confront the feelings that were bubbling to the surface, but she couldn't deny it any longer. Every time she was with Ethan, her heart raced. Every time their eyes met, there was an undeniable connection that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. But Mark was everything she thought she needed. He was steady, reliable, everything that her family expected. Ethan, on the other hand, was the spark, the passion, the one who made her feel like she was more than just a woman fulfilling expectations. "What if I can't let go of Mark?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What if I can't walk away from the life I've built with him?" Ethan's expression softened, and he reached out to gently lift her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I'm not asking you to choose, Mia. I'm not asking you to leave him. But you can't keep ignoring this between us. This connection." The weight of his words hit her hard, and for the first time, Mia found herself truly questioning everything. She had always believed she was doing the right thing by staying with Mark, by sticking to the path that had been laid out for her. But now, standing here with Ethan, she realized how much she had sacrificed in the name of security, and she wasn't sure if it was enough anymore. Mia pulled away from him, the distance between them growing as the conflict inside her deepened. "I don't know what to do," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "I feel like I'm being torn in two, and I don't know how to fix it." Ethan's eyes softened, and for a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. "You don't have to fix it, Mia. You just need to decide what's best for you. What do you really want? Because I don't want to be the one holding you back, but I don't want to watch you settle for something you're not truly happy with either." Mia took a deep breath, her mind spinning. She had always known this moment would come, the moment when she would have to face the truth about her feelings. But now that it was here, she didn't know she was ready to face the consequences. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't know if I can leave Mark. I don't know if I can walk away from everything I've built with him." Ethan nodded, a sadness in his eyes. "I understand, Mia, but whatever you decide, I need you to be honest with yourself. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be with someone who makes you feel alive." The words hung in the air, unanswered, and as Mia stood on the porch, the reality of the love triangle that had formed between her, Ethan, and Mark became all too real. There was no easy way out of this, no clear path to follow, and Mia knew, deep down, that the decision she would have to make would change everything. Chapter 7. Secrets unveiled. Days following their conversation felt like a blur of confusion and heartache. Mia couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, about the raw honesty that had passed between them, and yet the weight of her engagement to Mark pressed down on her shoulders with every step she took. Her emotions were caught in a tug of war, pulled between two men, two worlds that couldn't be more different. She hadn't expected it to be this hard, hadn't imagined the turmoil that would come with confronting her feelings. It was supposed to be simple, wasn't it? She was supposed to love Mark, to marry him and build a future together. She had spent years telling herself that was the right path, the safe path. But now, standing on the precipice of an uncertain future, she realized just how much she had been suppressing. Mia's thoughts were interrupted when Mark returned early from a business trip. The timing couldn't have been worse. She had been trying to sort through her feelings, trying to figure out what she wanted. But now Mark was back, and he was eager to pick up where they had left off. It wasn't that she didn't love him, she did, in her own way. He was kind, dependable, the man she could always count on. But the passion, the fire she had once felt for him had long since dulled, and every time she thought about Ethan, about the connection they shared, that fire ignited once again. Burning with intensity and longing, Mark was happy to be back, his easygoing smile and laughter filling the house. But Mia felt the difference. There was something missing between them, something she couldn't quite place. As the evening wore on, Mia found herself lost in thought, her gaze drifting out the window as she absent-mindedly stirred her tea. The image of Ethan's face, the way he had looked at her with such longing, such raw emotion, was burned into her mind. She hadn't been able to shake the intensity of his confession, how he had told her he'd always cared for her, that he had always felt something, just like she had. She had thought she could ignore it, pretend it didn't matter, but it was impossible now. "Hey, you okay?" Mark's voice pulled her back into the present. He stood in the doorway, a worried expression on his face. "You've been awfully quiet tonight." Mia blinked, focusing on him for the first time. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just tired, I guess," Mark nodded, though he didn't seem convinced. "Well, if you need anything, just let me know." Mia watched him as he turned and walked into the other room, a pang of guilt hitting her. How could she feel this way, torn between two men who both cared for her deeply. She wasn't the type to be selfish, to play with people's hearts, but she felt like she was standing on the edge of something she wasn't ready for. And yet, she knew it was inevitable. The pull toward Ethan was undeniable, and the more she tried to fight it, the stronger it became. Later that night, Mia found herself alone in the studio again. Her paint scattered across the table as she tried to focus on her latest piece, but her mind kept drifting back to Ethan. She thought about the way he had looked at her, the raw emotion in his eyes, the way he had confessed his feelings so openly. She thought about their childhood together, the memories that had always been so innocent, so pure, and how, in a moment, they had shifted into something more complicated, more intense. Her fingers moved instinctively, picking up a brush and running it across the canvas. Though she wasn't really seeing what she was painting, the strokes were erratic, messy, just like the chaos in her heart. And then, as though summoned by the force of her emotions, a memory surfaced, a conversation she had never fully understood at the time, but that now felt like a puzzle piece she had been missing. It was from years ago, when she and Mark had been spending the summer together before their relationship had deepened into something more serious. They had been walking along the old creek behind her house, the water trickling lazily around the rocks. Mark had been talking about their future, about the life they would build together, the house they would buy, the kids they would have. And as he spoke, Mia had been silent, lost in thought, trying to picture that future. But instead of feeling a sense of excitement or fulfillment, she had felt a hollow ache, a nagging sense that something was wrong, that she was settling for a life that wasn't truly hers. At the time, she had pushed the thought aside, telling herself that her doubts were just nerves, that she was just scared of commitment. But now, in the quiet of her studio, she realized the truth. The life she had envisioned with Mark was more about security and stability than passion. It was comfortable, yes, but it lacked the depth and fire that Ethan had always ignited in her. The realization hit her like a slap in the face. She had been so focused on doing what was expected of her, on living up to the image of the perfect fiancé, that she had never allowed herself to consider what she truly wanted, what she needed. A knock on the door startled her out of her thoughts. Mia's heart raced, her body stiffening in response. She knew who it was before she even stood up to answer the door. She opened it to find Ethan standing on the other side, his face serious, his eyes searching hers. "Mia," he began, his voice low and urgent. "We need to talk." Mia's breath caught in her throat, her heart hammering as she stepped aside to let him in. The air between them crackled with tension, and for the first time, Mia felt like she couldn't breathe. She had been running from the truth, running from the pull she felt toward Ethan. But now, standing in front of him, she knew there was no denying it any longer. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't keep pretending that I don't feel what I feel for you. And I can't keep ignoring the fact that I'm not happy with Mark, not truly happy." Ethan stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch hers. "Then what are you going to do, Mia? What do you want?" The question hung between them, heavy and full of possibility. Mia's chest tightened as she faced the truth she had been running from. She had spent so long denying her feelings, telling herself that everything would work out, that she could keep going down the path she had set for herself. But now, looking at Ethan, she knew she couldn't go back. She couldn't keep lying to herself any longer. "I don't know yet," Mia admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But I can't keep pretending anymore. I need to figure this out. For myself." Ethan's eyes softened, his thumb gently brushing across her hand. "Take your time, Mia. I'll be here, no matter what you decide." And as Mia stood there, the weight of everything pressing down on her, she realized that the truth had finally come to light. She was no longer the girl next door, trapped in a story of expectation and duty. She was a woman with choices to make, choices that would change everything. But the path ahead was uncertain, and Mia knew she had to walk it alone before she could figure out what truly mattered to her. Chapter 8. A heartbreaking decision. Days felt longer than ever. Mia wandered through them in a haze, lost in the swirl of emotions that had taken over her life. Every decision seemed impossible. Her heart was heavy with the weight of it all, the guilt, the confusion, the love she felt for both Mark and Ethan. How had everything gotten so tangled? She had spent her entire life planning for a future with Mark. They had grown up together, fallen in love in their own quiet way. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, companionship, and a steady, unwavering commitment. Mark was the man she had always envisioned by her side, the one who had been there through thick and thin, the one she had promised her life to. But now, everything was different. Ethan had returned, and with him came a storm she hadn't anticipated. The feelings she had buried long ago, the connection, the passion, the intensity had reignited in a way she couldn't ignore. He wasn't just the boy next door anymore. He was someone who challenged her, who made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. And that terrified her. Mia spent hours lying awake at night, her mind racing through the memories of her time with Mark, trying to convince herself that their future together was enough. But then her thoughts drifted to Ethan, the way he had looked at her, the raw honesty in his eyes when he had confessed his feelings, the way his touch had made her heart race. Every time she thought she was making progress, every time she tried to push him out of her mind, the pull toward him became stronger. She had always known that love wasn't supposed to feel like a choice between two people. Love was supposed to be simple, something that just happened, something you couldn't escape. But this was a maze, and every turn felt like it was leading her further from the woman she thought she was. The day of her engagement party arrived, and Mia felt like she was suffocating. It was meant to be a celebration of her future with Mark, a public declaration of their commitment. But as she stood in front of the mirror, staring at herself in the dress she had picked out months ago, she felt more like a stranger than ever. The woman looking back at her didn't feel like the woman she had imagined she'd be. She didn't feel like someone who was ready to marry Mark. Mia's phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Ethan. She hadn't heard from him all day, and part of her was grateful for the space. But when she saw his name on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. She opened the message and read the words that made her stomach twist in knots. "I know you're probably busy today. I just wanted you to know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it. But I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with what we've become. Take your time, but don't make a choice just because it's the easy one." The words stung. Ethan wasn't asking her to choose him over Mark, but the weight of his unspoken plea was clear. He wanted her to decide what truly made her happy, not what was expected of her. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she read the message over and over. The truth she had been avoiding finally coming to the surface. Her heart ached as she realized that she couldn't ignore it any longer. She couldn't continue living for other people's expectations. She had spent so long doing that, trying to please everyone, trying to fit into a life that wasn't hers. But now, standing on the edge of everything she had worked for, Mia realized she couldn't keep lying to herself. Mark knocked on the door, pulling Mia out of her thoughts. She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to compose herself. "Are you ready?" Mark asked, his voice cheerful, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. He knew something was off, and Mia could see it. He was no fool. "I'll be ready in a minute," Mia replied, forcing a smile, trying to push down the emotions that threatened to spill over. She needed to make a decision. She couldn't go into the party pretending that everything was okay, when she knew deep down that it wasn't. As she stepped into the party, the familiar faces of friends and family greeted her with smiles and congratulations. The room was filled with laughter, music, and the sound of clinking glasses, but Mia felt like an outsider in her own life. The night blurred as she forced herself to play the part of the happy fiancé, but inside, she was torn apart. Her mind kept drifting to Ethan, to the moments they had shared, to the way he made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. And then, in the middle of it all, she saw him. Ethan stood by the door, his figure like a shadow in the corner of the room. His gaze locked with hers, and for a brief moment, everything around her faded away. The noise, the chatter, the party, it all disappeared, leaving only the two of them in the room. Mia's heart raced as she excused herself from the conversation she was having and made her way over to him. The closer she got, the more her heart seemed to beat in her throat. "Ethan," she whispered when she reached him, her voice trembling. He stepped closer, his eyes soft but filled with something she couldn't name. "Mia," he replied quietly, his voice just as shaky as hers. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence between them was thick, filled with everything they hadn't said, everything that had been building between them for so long. Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle, but it sent a wave of warmth through her body. "I'm sorry," Mia said suddenly, her voice breaking. "I don't know what I'm doing. I've been lying to myself for so long, pretending that this," she gestured between them, her chest height, "wasn't real. But it is, Ethan. It's real, and I can't ignore it anymore." Ethan's face softened as he reached up to touch her cheek. "Mia, you don't have to apologize. You have to do what's right for you. But you also have to be honest with yourself." Mia looked down at their hands, her mind racing. She loved Mark, but her heart was calling out for Ethan, the man who had always been there, the man who made her feel things she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, her heart breaking as she spoke the words. "I can't keep living for everyone else. I have to make a choice." Ethan's eyes darkened, a mix of hope and sadness flickering in them. "Whatever you decide, Mia, I'll respect it. But you deserve to be happy. You deserve to choose your own future." Her breath hitched as she looked at him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Mia felt a glimmer of clarity. The decision wasn't easy, and it wouldn't come without consequences, but for the first time in a long time, Mia knew what she had to do. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. And as Mia stepped back into the party, the weight of the decision settled on her shoulders, but for the first time, it didn't feel as heavy. She had taken the first step toward finding the life that was truly hers, and no matter what happened, she knew that she was finally being true to herself. The girl next door had grown up. Chapter 9. The spark of betrayal. Mia had spent the entire night lying awake, her mind racing with the weight of her decision. The words she had said to Ethan, the promise she had made to herself, kept echoing in her head. She knew what she needed to do, what was right for her. But the reality of it all was much harder than she had anticipated. Choosing Ethan was no easy decision, and the guilt gnawed at her. She had been with Mark for so long, and she knew how much he loved her, how much she had invested in their future. It wasn't fair to throw all of that away, not without consequences. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face, the raw vulnerability in his eyes, when he had told her that he would respect whatever decision she made. He hadn't pressured her, hadn't demanded she choose him. He had simply asked her to choose herself. The next morning, as Mia sat at her kitchen table, sipping her coffee, the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew who it was before she even looked out the window. Mark. He had been distant for the past few days, sensing that something was off, but now, it seemed, he was ready to confront her. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the door, then finally stood and walked to answer it. As she opened the door, Mark stood there, his expression serious but composed. His eyes searched hers, as though trying to read what she wasn't saying. "Mia," he said softly, stepping inside when she didn't move to greet him. "We need to talk." She nodded silently, her heart pounding in her chest. She had known this conversation was coming. She had known that once she made her decision, the fallout would be inevitable. "I've been thinking about things," Mark began, his voice calm but heavy with emotion. "About us, and I know something's been wrong. You've been distant, and I can see it in your eyes. You've been avoiding me." Mia swallowed hard, feeling the guilt press against her chest. She had tried so hard to keep things normal, to convince herself that everything was fine. But it wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time. "Mark," she started, but her voice caught in her throat. She didn't know how to say this, how to explain the unexplainable, how to tell him that the future they had built together no longer felt right for her. "I've known you for so long, Mia," Mark continued, his voice a little softer now. I thought we were happy. I thought we were on the same page. But you're pulling away from me, and I don't know why. Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she fought to keep them in check. She had never wanted to hurt Mark. She had never wanted to be the one to break his heart. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to explain this, but I'm not happy. Not like I should be. I've been lying to myself for so long, and I can't keep doing it. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. Mark's expression faltered, his confusion deepening. What do you mean? Are you saying you don't love me anymore? Mia shook her head, feeling the weight of the truth crushing her chest. I do love you, Mark, but I'm not in love with you. Not the way I should be. And I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that I'm happy when I'm not. The silence between them was deafening. Mark took a step back, his face a mask of disbelief, his eyes darkening with hurt. You're in love with someone else, aren't you? Mia's breath hitched, and she nodded slowly, unable to lie. The truth had already spilled out, and she couldn't take it back now. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. I am. Mark's face twisted with pain, and for a moment, Mia thought she saw something else, something darker. He stepped back, his jaw tightening with barely contained anger. I knew something was going on between you two, he muttered, his voice low and bitter. You've been so distant, and I've seen the way you look at him, the way you look at Ethan. I should have known. Mia flinched at the sound of Ethan's name, and a wave of guilt washed over her. She never wanted Mark to feel betrayed, but the truth was unavoidable now. Ethan had become more than just a childhood friend. He had become the person who made her question everything she had ever known about love. Mark's voice rose, now tinged with anger. You're throwing away everything we have for him, for that guy. After all we've been through. Mia recoiled at his harsh words, her heart aching with the realization of how much pain she had caused him. She had never intended for it to come to this, had never wanted to hurt him. But the truth was that she had been lying to herself for far too long. I'm sorry, Mark, she said, her voice cracking. I never meant for this to happen, but I can't stay with you out of obligation. I can't keep living a lie. Mark's face hardened, and for the first time, Mia saw something in his eyes that terrified her: resentment, anger, and a deep, bitter sense of betrayal. You're making a mistake, Mia, he spat, his voice cold. You don't know what you're getting into with him. He's not the same as me. He's always been a distraction for you, and when he's gone, you'll regret this. Mia stood there, frozen, as Mark stormed out of the house, the door slamming behind him with a force that made her jump. Her heart shattered in that instant. The man she had once planned a future with was now lost to her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just ruined everything. But even as the tears fell, even as the weight of her actions sank in, Mia knew that she had made the right choice. She had chosen herself, chosen what would make her happy, even if it meant losing everything she had once known. And as she wiped her eyes, she realized that the hardest part wasn't saying goodbye to Mark. It was facing the future, one that was uncertain and terrifying, but also filled with the possibility of something new. The spark of betrayal had ignited a fire she couldn't put out, and as much as it hurt, Mia knew that she was finally free to follow her heart, no matter where it would lead. Chapter 10. The breaking point days following Mark's departure were an agonizing blur. Mia spent them in a strange kind of limbo, where every moment felt like a heavy step in a direction she wasn't entirely ready to go. She knew her decision had been inevitable, that it had been the right one for her, but it didn't make the aftermath any easier. She had shattered Mark's world, and in doing so, had also unraveled the safety net that had been her life for years. Her thoughts were consumed by the fallout, the broken promises, and the empty space Mark had left behind. Every room in her house seemed to carry his absence, and as much as she tried to push it away, she couldn't escape the weight of what she had done. The guilt lingered like a shadow, reminding her that the price of choosing herself was far steeper than she had anticipated. It was late one afternoon when Ethan showed up at her door. As if the universe had known exactly when she needed him. She had been sitting by the window, staring blankly at the street outside, when the soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mia's heart skipped when she saw him standing there, his familiar face full of concern. "Mia," he said softly, his voice low as though he sensed the tension in the air even before he entered. "Can we talk?" Her heart ached at the sight of him. She had always known that this moment would come, the moment when the past and the present collided. Ethan, the boy next door, the one she had always trusted, was now the man she was choosing. But even as she thought that, a pang of uncertainty stabbed through her. Was she ready for this? Was she ready to move forward with him, to embrace the love that had been waiting for her all along? "Of course," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she stepped aside to let him in. They sat in the living room, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Mia could feel Ethan's eyes on her, but she couldn't bring herself to look at him, not just yet. The silence was deafening as they sat across from each other, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. "How are you holding up?" Mia blinked, trying to steady her emotions. She had expected him to ask, but the question still felt like a weight on her chest. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "Some days, I feel like I'm drowning in everything I've done. Other days, I feel free. But mostly, I just feel lost." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowing in concern. "You're not lost, Mia. You're just figuring things out. It's okay to be confused. You've been through a lot." "I've hurt him, Ethan," she whispered, the guilt creeping back into her chest. "Mark, he didn't deserve this. I was supposed to marry him. I thought I was happy with him, but I wasn't. And now, I've destroyed everything." Ethan's expression softened, and he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You didn't destroy anything, Mia. You made a choice. And sometimes, making the right choice doesn't come without pain. But that doesn't mean it wasn't worth it. It just means it's part of the journey." Mia's breath caught at the sincerity in his words. She had needed to hear this, needed to hear that she wasn't the villain in this story, even if she felt like one. "I never wanted to hurt him, but I couldn't keep lying to myself, Ethan. I couldn't pretend anymore." "I know," he replied softly, "and I know it's not easy. I'm not asking you to forget what you had with Mark, or to disregard everything you've built with him. But I'm here now, and I want you to know that you don't have to face this alone." Mia's chest tightened at his words. She hadn't realized just how much she needed to hear them, how much she needed to know that Ethan was there for her, that he wasn't going to walk away just because things were messy. The weight of the decision she had made finally seemed to settle in her heart, and for the first time since she had let go of Mark, Mia felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't just choosing Ethan, she was choosing herself, and that choice, as difficult as it was the most important one she could make. "I'm scared," Mia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared that I'll regret this. I'm scared that I'll lose everything, my family, my friends, even you." Ethan squeezed her hand gently, his eyes never leaving hers. "You won't lose me, Mia. I'm not going anywhere. And I know it's scary, but sometimes we have to take risks to find what really matters." Mia closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. The truth was, she had spent so long playing it safe, following the path that was expected of her, that she had forgotten what it felt like to truly live for herself. And now, standing on the edge of something new, she felt the weight of it all, the fear, the guilt, the excitement, and realized that it was okay to be afraid. It was okay to feel lost, but it was also okay to move forward, to take that first step into the unknown. "I'm scared too," she admitted, finally meeting his gaze. "But I don't want to be scared anymore. I want to live, Ethan. I want to build something with you, if you'll have me." Ethan's eyes softened, and for a moment, it felt like the world had shifted in place. He stood up, pulling her into his arms, holding her close as if the weight of the world had finally been lifted from her shoulders. "I'll always have you, Mia," he whispered against her hair, "and we'll figure this out, together." As she held on to him, Mia realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. With Ethan by her side, she knew they could build a future that was hers to create, without fear, without regret. And as the warmth of his embrace enveloped her, Mia finally understood what it meant to choose love, not just for someone else, but for herself. A dangerous the days following Mia's decision to embrace her future, with Ethan felt both like a breath of fresh air and a whirlwind. The tension between them had eased, but the undercurrent of fear still lingered, threading through their every moment together. Mark's absence in her life was like an open wound, one that hadn't fully healed. She had chosen Ethan, but the echoes of the life she had left behind still haunted her. Mark hadn't taken her decision well. He had tried to call several times, leaving angry messages, begging her to reconsider. He had been hurt, and his emotions were raw, which Mia understood. But she also knew that nothing would ever change the fact that she was no longer the person she had been when she was with him. No longer the person she could pretend to be for the sake of the relationship. She had tried to give him space, tried to let him process everything in his own way. But what Mia hadn't anticipated was just how far Mark was willing to go to keep her in his life. He had always been the steady, predictable one, the man who respected boundaries. But now, Mia could feel the darkness creeping into his behavior. The possessiveness that had always been beneath the surface, now bubbling to the top. It started slowly, with subtle comments, casual accusations disguised as concern. Mia noticed how he watched her, how his eyes lingered too long whenever they spoke, as though trying to read her, trying to force her into a box that no longer fit. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. And the more he pushed, the more Mia realized that he wasn't trying to win her back. He was trying to control her, to force her into a decision she wasn't ready to make. One afternoon, Mia was at home, alone with her thoughts, when her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Mark. "We need to talk. Come meet me." Her stomach clenched. She had been avoiding him, trying to keep the distance they both needed. But now it was clear that Mark wasn't going to let her go without a fight. The text left her feeling uneasy. It wasn't just about closure anymore. It was about something darker. Mia knew this wasn't going to be a peaceful conversation, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face what he was going to say. Still, she couldn't avoid it forever. She needed to find closure. She needed to confront Mark once and for all, to let him know where they both stood, even if it hurt. She met him at a quiet cafe, one they had frequented in their early days together, where everything had seemed so simple. But now, the nostalgia felt bittersweet. When Mark walked in, he was different. His face was tight with barely concealed anger, and his eyes didn't have the warmth she once recognized. Instead, they were cold, calculating. "Mia," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he slid into the chair across from her. "I don't understand. Why him? After everything we've been through," Mia sighed, the words heavy on her tongue. "Mark, I've already told you. I'm not in love with you anymore. It's not easy to say, and I know it's not easy to hear, but it's the truth." Mark leaned forward, his fists clenched on the table, his gaze intense. "I don't believe you. You've been with me 4 years. You can't just turn off your feelings for me like a light switch. This thing with Ethan, it's just a phase, Mia. It's not real. You're just confused." "No, Mark," Mia said softly, shaking her head. "It's not a phase. I've been lying to myself for so long, trying to convince myself that I was happy with you. But I'm not, and I'm not going to keep pretending that I am." Mark's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You think you're going to be happy with him? You think he's going to be there for you when things get tough? You don't know him like I do, Mia. He's not the man you think he is. He's always been a distraction, and you're throwing everything away for him." Mia's heart raced at the accusation. She hadn't expected this level of hostility, hadn't prepared for the way Mark was now twisting the truth to fit his narrative. "That's not fair, Mark. You don't know anything about Ethan or what we've been through. What we have is real." Mark's face twisted with something darker, resentment jealousy, and a deep sense of betrayal. Real. Don't make me laugh. You don't think I know what's going on. You think I haven't seen the way you look at him. You're blinded by him. Mia, you're so caught up in the idea of this perfect love that you can't see the reality. You're making a huge mistake, and I'll be damned if I let you throw away everything we built for a man like him. Mia stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm choosing what's best for me. I'm choosing to live my life for me, not for anyone else. Mark stood too, his eyes narrowing. You think this is just about you. You think you can walk away from me so easily. His voice dropped to a low growl. I won't let you go, Mia. You're mine. You always have been. The words hit her like a slap, and for the first time, Mia felt a cold rush of fear wash over her. This wasn't just about a broken heart. This wasn't about the end of a relationship. This was something darker, something dangerous. Mark took a step toward her, his expression hard. You'll regret this, Mia. You'll regret choosing him. And when you do, I'll be here. I'll always be here. Mia backed away slowly, her breath shallow, trying to control the panic rising in her chest. She had never seen this side of Mark before, the possessiveness, the manipulation, the entitlement. She had always known he had his flaws, but this was something she couldn't ignore. I don't need you to be here, Mark, she said, her voice steady despite the fear. I'm done with that. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, seething with anger and frustration. As Mia walked out of the cafe and into the cool evening air, her heart raced, her mind reeling from the confrontation. Mark wasn't going to let her go easily. She had known he would fight for her, but she hadn't anticipated this level of control. He wasn't just angry, he was obsessed. And now, Mia realized, she was caught in a dangerous game, one where Mark wasn't going to play fair. As she reached her car, she glanced over her shoulder, feeling the weight of the decision she had just made. It was too late to turn back now. She had chosen Ethan, but the road ahead was not going to be easy. Mark was not going to let go without a fight, and neither was she. She wasn't just fighting for her heart anymore, she was fighting for her freedom, and Mia knew that the battle had only just begun. Chapter 12. The escape. Weight of the confrontation with Mark sat heavy on Mia's chest. The calm exterior she had tried to maintain had cracked in front of him, and now, as she sat in the silence of her car, the gravity of what she had just done hit her. It wasn't just the words that had hurt. It was the unspoken threat behind them, the chilling realization that Mark wasn't going to let her go without a fight. He had been controlling, manipulative, and she had been too blind to see it until now. Mia's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white, as she tried to steady her breathing. The panic that had clawed at her heart earlier was now a dull ache, a lingering discomfort that refused to be shaken off. She hadn't expected Mark to react this way. She had hoped that with time, he would come to understand her decision, respect it. But now she knew he didn't see this as her choice to make. To him, Mia was a possession, something that was his to hold on to. The thought made her shudder. As she drove back home, her mind was on autopilot, her eyes trained on the road ahead, but her thoughts circling back to Ethan. He had been the one to help her see the truth, to help her find the strength to choose herself. But now, with Mark's words still fresh in her mind, she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. What if Mark was right? What if this new life she had chosen was just a fleeting illusion? Ethan was the one who had always been there, the boy next door, the one who understood her in ways no one else could. But she had to face the reality, the truth of what she had walked away from. The love she had built with Mark, the comfort, the life they had shared, it wasn't something that disappeared overnight. And despite everything, Mia wasn't sure if she could escape the guilt that gnawed at her, or the fear of what would happen when Mark realized she was no longer in his control. She parked her car in the driveway, sitting for a moment with her head resting against the steering wheel. She didn't want to go inside. She didn't want to face the uncertainty of her decision, the aftermath of the choices she had made. But she knew she had to. She couldn't stay in this limbo forever. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and walked inside. The house was quiet, too quiet, and for a moment, Mia stood still in the hallway, the emptiness of it all pressing in on her. She hadn't even realized how much she had been avoiding the silence. It had been her refuge, a place to escape from everything until now. The doorbell rang. Mia froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Not after everything that had happened with Mark. Her heart raced, and she approached the door cautiously. As she peered through the peephole, her breath caught in her throat. It was Ethan. Her pulse quickened as she opened the door. And there he stood, his face a mixture of concern and determination. Without a word, he stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. "You okay?" Ethan asked softly, his voice thick with worrying. Mia nodded, her lips trembling as she tried to hold herself together. "I will be. She trailed off, not sure what to say. She didn't want to bring the weight of Mark's threats onto Ethan. She didn't want to drag him into the mess that had been her life with Mark. But the look in his eyes told her that he already knew. Something was wrong. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan said, his voice a comfort she hadn't realized she needed. "But I'm here for whatever you need." Mia swallowed hard. The moment she had feared, the moment she knew would eventually come, had arrived. Mark had tried to tear her apart with his words, his threats, his control. But standing here, in front of Ethan, she knew what she had to do. She needed to leave everything behind, all of the pain, the fear, the suffocating hold Mark had on her life. She needed to escape. "Ethan," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do. He's not going to stop. He won't just let me go. He's too." Ethan stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. "You don't have to fight him alone, Mia. We'll figure this out, together." The sincerity in his eyes calmed her racing thoughts, and for the first time in days, Mia felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't alone in this. She had made the decision to choose her happiness, and now she needed to follow through, no matter the cost. "I'm scared, Ethan," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I don't know if I can do this. If I can leave everything behind, leave him behind." Ethan's expression softened, and he cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "You're stronger than you think, Mia, and you don't have to do it alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The words hit her like a wave, and for the first time, Mia felt the fear that had held her back slowly start to dissolve. She had spent so much time trying to please everyone, trying to live up to the expectations of others, that she had forgotten what it felt like to live for herself. Ethan was right. She didn't have to do this alone. "We'll get away," Ethan said quietly, his hand now on her back, guiding her toward the door. "You don't have to stay here anymore. I'll help you." Mia's heart fluttered with a mix of fear and hope. The life she had known, the life she had tried to hold on to, was slipping away. But what was left for her if she stayed? More of the same suffocating control, more of the fear that Mark would never let her go. And so, without looking back, she followed Ethan out of the house and into the car. The night was still young, but the road ahead was uncertain. There was no turning back, no way to undo the choices she had made. But for the first time in years, Mia felt the stirrings of freedom, the promise of a new beginning. She wasn't just leaving Mark behind. She was leaving the version of herself that had been bound by expectations, by duty. She was stepping into a life where she could finally breathe, where she could live for herself, without fear, without guilt. As the car pulled away, Mia looked out the window, the city lights flickering in the distance, and for the first time, she felt like she was truly escaping, not just from Mark, but from the woman she had been. She was becoming someone new, and this time, it was all her choice. The road ahead was unknown, but with Ethan by her side, Mia knew she could face whatever came next. Chapter 13. A web of least escape had been necessary. Mia knew that, deep down. But even as she sat in the quiet, unfamiliar space of Ethan's apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that still lingered in the pit of her stomach. She had walked away from everything she had ever known, everything that had been her security. She had chosen freedom, but in doing so, She had unknowingly walked into a world filled with uncertainty, and now she was facing the consequences. It hadn't been easy to leave the house she had spent years in, the place that had once felt like home, where Mark's presence had always been just a bit too suffocating. Ethan had promised to help her, to keep her safe, but Mia couldn't help but feel that she was walking a tightrope, caught between two worlds. The world she had just left behind, with all its memories and obligations, and the uncertain one she was stepping into now, where everything was new and uncharted. The days that followed were a blur. Mia spent most of her time with Ethan, trying to adjust to this new life they were building together, but her mind kept returning to Mark's angry calls, his frantic messages. She hadn't heard from him directly in a few days, but the tension in the air was palpable. She knew it wouldn't be long before he showed up at her door, demanding answers, demanding a chance to win her back. But then, just as she began to breathe a little easier, Mia received a text message that shook her to the core. It was from an unknown number, and when she opened it, the words seemed to jump off the screen, sending a chill down her spine. "I know what you're doing. You think you're safe with him, but you're wrong. I'm not letting you go that easily. The truth will come out. Mia, you'll regret this." Mia stared at the message, her heart pounding in her chest. The message was short, cryptic, and threatening. It didn't take a genius to figure out who it was from. Mark. She had known this was coming. She had known that he wouldn't let her go without a fight, but the weight of his words hit her harder than she had expected. The fact that he had somehow found a way to contact her, to threaten her in such a cold, calculated manner, sent a wave of dread coursing through her veins. She showed Ethan the message immediately, her hands trembling as she handed him her phone. His face darkened as he read it, his jaw tightening. "We need to be careful, Mia," he said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "Mark's not just upset, he's angry. And when people are angry, they do things they normally wouldn't." Mia nodded, the knot in her stomach tightening. She had always known that Mark was possessive, but this felt like something darker, something more dangerous. He wasn't going to let her go without a fight, and Mia wasn't sure she was prepared for the fight he was willing to bring. Ethan sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. "We'll figure this out. We'll make sure you're safe. But you need to stay strong, Mia. Don't let him pull you back into his web." The words hit her harder than she expected. A web. That's exactly what it had been. For so long, Mia had felt trapped in a life that wasn't hers, in a relationship that had promised safety, but had delivered only control. Mark had woven a web around her, a web that had entangled her so deeply she hadn't realized she was suffocating until it was almost too late. But now, Mia was free. She had chosen to step away, to break the bonds that had held her captive for so long. And yet, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a battle, like a war that was just beginning. She had taken the first step, but Mark wasn't going to let her walk away so easily. That night, after they had talked, Mia lay in bed, the darkness pressing in around her. The apartment was quiet, save for the occasional sound of traffic outside, but the silence inside her head was deafening. She couldn't stop thinking about Mark, about the threats he had made. She knew she had to take control of her life, to make sure that he couldn't hurt her or anyone else she cared about again. But how? The next morning, Ethan came up with a plan. "We need to be proactive, Mia," he said, his voice firm as he stood in front of her. "You can't just sit here and wait for him to show up. We need to take action." They spent the day contacting a lawyer, getting advice on how to protect herself legally. Mia hadn't wanted to get the authorities involved, but she realized now that it was the only way to protect herself from Mark's manipulation. She couldn't keep running from him, couldn't keep hiding. She needed to take the steps necessary to make sure he couldn't harm her or anyone she loved anymore. It wasn't easy, and the process felt overwhelming. But with Ethan by her side, Mia felt like she was taking back control. She was no longer the woman caught in Mark's web of lies and manipulation. She was someone new, someone who had fought for her freedom and was willing to fight to keep it. By the time they left the lawyer's office, Mia felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, though the fear still lingered. Mark was unpredictable, dangerous even, but now Mia had a plan in place. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Ethan, and together, they would make sure she stayed safe. As they walked out into the bright sunlight, Mia glanced at Ethan, her heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and fear. She had taken the first step toward freedom, but the road ahead was still uncertain. Mark wasn't going to give up easily, but neither was she. "I'm ready," she said softly, her voice steady despite the lingering fear. "I won't let him control me anymore." Ethan squeezed her hand, his eyes full of determination. "You're stronger than you think, Mia, and I'll be here, every step of the way." Together, they walked forward, ready to face whatever came next, stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. Mia had escaped the web Mark had spun around her, and no matter what happened, she wasn't going back. Chapter 14. The final showdown. Quiet tension that had settled over Mia's life in the weeks since Mark's threats began to feel like the calm before the storm. Every morning, she woke up with a sense of dread in her stomach, a tight knot that wouldn't loosen. Despite everything Ethan had done to reassure her, despite the legal steps they had taken, the fear still lingered, and she couldn't help but feel like Mark was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ethan had been a constant support, his presence grounding her in a way she had never experienced before. He had taken every precaution to make sure she was safe, from installing security systems in her apartment to making sure she had a direct line to him whenever she needed it. But even his calm demeanor couldn't entirely erase the gnawing anxiety that clawed at Mia's chest. She knew the confrontation was coming, and she knew it was going to be brutal. It was the middle of the night when it happened. Mia was asleep in Ethan's apartment, the sound of the city below drifting through the window. She hadn't expected to hear the knock at the door, especially not that late. But when it came, loud and insistent, her heart leapt in her chest, waking her from a deep sleep. She scrambled out of bed, her pulse quickening, as the knock came again, more forceful this time. "Ethan," she whispered, trying to shake him awake. Ethan grudgingly opened his eyes, his brow furrowing. "What's wrong?" "I think it's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan's body tensed, and he quickly pushed himself out of bed. "Stay here," he said, his voice firm. "I'll handle this." But Mia wasn't about to sit idly by. She followed him into the living room, her heart pounding, as the sound of the knock echoed again. Ethan glanced at her over his shoulder, his expression hardening as he saw the determination in her eyes. "I don't want you near the door," Ethan warned, his tone unyielding. "Stay behind me." Mia nodded, swallowing her fear as she crouched behind him. The door was barely a few steps away, but it felt like an entire world separated her from safety. Mark's voice floated through the door, deep and menacing. "Open up, Mia. I know you're in there." It sent a shiver down Mia's spine. She could hear the anger in his voice, the desperation to get to her. He wasn't asking any more. He was demanding. Ethan turned to Mia one last time. "Go call the police. I'll deal with him." She hesitated, but nodded, her mind racing. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking. The operator answered quickly, and Mia gave them the address, her voice cracking as she explained the situation. She could hear Mark's voice growing louder, banging on the door, and a sickening feeling of dread settled in her stomach. What if they didn't get here in time? What if he pushed through? She heard Ethan speaking through the door, his voice steady but edged with a warning she had never heard before. "Mark, this is over. You need to leave now. Don't make me call the cops." Mia couldn't hear Mark's response, but she could feel the rage building in the air. It was clear that he wasn't going to walk away without a confrontation. The adrenaline coursing through her veins made her feel like her heart was going to explode. Every second felt like an eternity. She turned back to the phone. "Please," she whispered to the operator. "We need help." The door shook with the force of another hit, and Mia gasped, her body tense as she heard the sound of it splintering. Her blood ran cold. "They're coming, Mia," the operator reassured her, but Mia wasn't sure if she believed her. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as the door cracked open. And there, standing in the doorway, was Mark. His face was twisted with rage, his clothes disheveled, and his eyes wild with a crazed intensity. Ethan stood firmly between them, his stance protective, but there was an undeniable edge to his posture. He wasn't afraid of Mark, but Mia was. She had seen this side of him before, the man who thought he could control everything and everyone around him. But this time, Mia wasn't his to control. "Get out of my way, Ethan," Mark snarled, his voice low and threatening. "I'm not letting you hurt her, Mark," Ethan said calmly, his gaze unwavering. "This ends tonight." Mark's eyes flicked between them, the realization sinking in that Mia wasn't going to back down. His fists clenched, and for a moment, Mia thought he might lunge at them both. But before he could move, the sirens grew louder, and Mark hesitated, his posture faltering slightly. "Get out of here before things get worse, Mark," Ethan said, his voice cold as steel. Mark's eyes flashed with fury. "You think you can just take her from me? You think you're better than me?" His voice cracked as he stepped closer, but Ethan stood his ground, unwavering. The door behind him opened, and two uniformed officers stepped inside, their presence commanding the room. Mark froze, his rage simmering beneath the surface, but it was clear to Mia that the situation was already out of his control. He was no longer in charge. The officers quickly stepped between them, one of them moving to grab Mark's arm. "Sir, you need to come with us." Mark's eyes flicked to Mia one last time, his gaze dark and cold. "This isn't over, Mia. You'll regret this. You think you're safe now, but you're not. You'll see." Mia felt a wave of relief as the officers led Mark away, his words trailing off into the distance. Ethan stepped forward, his expression softening as he looked at her, his eyes full of reassurance. "He's gone," Ethan whispered. "It's over." Mia nodded, her body trembling from the adrenaline and fear that had built up over the course of the evening. She felt like she had just crossed a line in her life that she could never come back from. This moment, this night, was the final step in her escape, and now there was no turning back. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She buried her face in his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath beneath her cheek. "I'm not going anywhere, Mia," he murmured. "You're safe. You're with me." The weight of everything that had happened seemed to lift in that moment, and Mia realized that, for the first time in a long while, she was truly free. Mark's grip on her life had finally been broken, and now she was free to choose the future she wanted with Ethan by her side. The battle was over, but this wasn't the end of Mia's story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe again. Chapter 15. Not the end yet. The weeks after the confrontation with Mark felt like a blur, but in the best way possible. Mia had finally, truly, stepped into the life she had always dreamed of, one where she was free to choose her own path. Mark was no longer a shadow looming over her every decision, and the constant weight of his threats had been lifted from her shoulders. With Ethan by her side, she felt like she could breathe again, like she was no longer running from her past, but running toward a future she had only begun to imagine. But just as Mia was starting to feel like everything was settling into place, a new challenge presented itself, one that would force her to reevaluate everything she thought she knew. One crisp morning, as the sun filtered through the windows of Ethan's apartment, Mia sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee. Her mind was calm, free from the usual storm of worrying and fear that had dominated her life for so long. Ethan had just left for work, leaving her with a few quiet hours to herself. It was the first time in months that she had felt truly at peace. That was until her phone buzzed. Mia frowned as she saw an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. She hesitated for a moment, her thumb hovering over the call button. Something about it felt off, but with a deep breath, she answered. "Hello, is this Mia?" The girl who thought she could escape. The voice on the other end was low, smooth, and chillingly familiar. It was Mark. Her heart stopped. Every instinct in her body screamed for her to hang up, to block the number and forget about it. But she couldn't, Mark, she said, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. I told you it's over. Don't you dare. You think you're safe now. He interrupted, his voice dripping with venom. You think just because the police got involved, everything's going to magically disappear. You're wrong, Mia. I've been patient, but I'm done waiting. Mia's stomach dropped as she stood up, pacing the small apartment. What do you want, Mark? You lost. This is over. Mark's laugh was cold and empty. You don't get it, do you? You think I'm just going to walk away and let you live your life with him? I won't be ignored, Mia. And neither will the truth. Mia's breath caught in her throat. The truth? What was he talking about? What do you mean? She demanded, her heart pounding. What truth? Oh, don't act so innocent, Mark sneered. You think I don't know about your little secret? I know everything, Mia. I've kept my eyes on you, even when you thought I was out of the picture. And believe me, the world is about to learn what kind of person you really are. Panic surged through Mia as she realized what he meant. The truth. What truth? She had been so focused on her escape from him that she hadn't considered what else he might know. What he might do to 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 now. I don't know what you're talking about, Mia whispered, her voice trembling. Oh, you'll find out soon enough. Mark's voice was icy, laced with malice. I'll make sure of it. You can't hide from me, Mia. You never could. And then the line went dead. Mia stood frozen, the phone slipping from her hand and clattering onto the floor. Her mind raced. What had he meant? What could he possibly know that could destroy her? She tried to steady her breathing, to calm herself, but it felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. The truth. The truth. What truth? For a few moments, she tried to convince herself that it was just another empty threat. Mark had made plenty of them before, trying to manipulate her into coming back, trying to control her, even from a distance. But this time, there was something different in his voice, a quiet, dangerous certainty that made Mia's blood run cold. She immediately grabbed her phone and dialed Ethan's number, her fingers shaking. It rang once, twice, and then he answered. Mia, what's wrong? Ethan, I think Mark knows something, she said, her voice frantic. Something he's going to use against me. I don't know what it is, but he said. Mia, slow down. What did he say? Ethan's voice was steady, calm despite the fear in her tone. She explained the conversation as best as she could, her mind racing. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Mia, I need you to listen to me carefully, he said, his tone serious. Mark is trying to manipulate you. He's playing on your fears. Whatever it is he's threatening, whatever truth he's talking about, don't let him control you. We'll figure this out, okay? We'll do it together. Mia nodded, her hands trembling as she clutched the phone to her ear. I don't know what to do. Ethan, what if he's right? What if there's something out there, something that could ruin everything? Mia, listen to me, Ethan said firmly. You've come this far. You've made the hardest decisions of your life. Don't let him drag you back into his web. We're going to handle this, together. We'll make sure he can't hurt you. His words were a balm to her frayed nerves, but the fear still lingered. She wanted to believe him, to trust that everything would be okay. But in her gut, she knew that Mark wouldn't go down quietly. There was something lurking beneath the surface, and Mia didn't know if she was prepared for what Mark was about to do next. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Ethan insisted that she stay with him, that they take every precaution to ensure her safety. But Mia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that the truth Mark had threatened to expose was something she wasn't prepared to face. The fear and doubt that had started to fade slowly crept back into her heart. Just as she was about to leave for Ethan's apartment, she received another message, this time from an unknown email address, with a subject line that made her blood run cold. You think you can escape your past? You're wrong. The truth is coming. Be ready. And then the first bombshell dropped. An old photo of Mia with someone she had hoped never to see again. Someone from her past, someone who had disappeared long ago, but who, somehow, Mark had kept track of. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to come together. And Mia realized, in horror, that Mark's knowledge wasn't just limited to her and Ethan. It was something much darker, much more dangerous, and Mia was at the heart of it all. The truth was coming for her, and it was worse than anything she could have imagined.